So async methods. Let's have a talk about that before we continue. Think of it this way. Whenever you do a request or an HTTP request to the wire, you don't know when you'll get a response, to be honest. You don't know if it'll take 50 milliseconds, a second, a week. A week is probably a bit high, but you don't know when you'll get a reply. Now the problem is that in JavaScript, the code is just executed line by line. It just keeps running. It won't stop. It'll just execute everything line by line. So if we just keep executing stuff, you'll notice at some point we might not have the data and we'll try to present the data. But it's not there yet because we have to wait for the data to come back from the server, right? So if we just run over our code and at some point we say show all the data, but the data isn't returned yet, we have a problem. So that's why we need to start using async methods. Now, there's a few ways to do this. The plain old JavaScript, they're using something called callbacks, and that's kind of obsolete. It's still used, but I think we're kind of moving away from that. The second step they did was something called promises. We can actually make promises, and I know if you go to the Tour of Heroes, if we go in here and you go to the top inside HTTP here in the Tour of Heroes, you can actually see promises and how you can use these promises. Let me just try and show you. Now I'm not going to go over promises, but you can always on what we call an observable, you can convert that into a promise. So let me just keep it at that. You can go and watch the tutorial if you want to. I just want to get some data, so I really don't care how we do it, except I want to use the newest way, and that's using observables. So again, the problem is still that we need to kind of wait for the response to come back. So when I do a send right here, I'm sending a request to a backend. The REST API says at some point, here's the data for you, Lars. It sends a request back to me, but I do not know the time frame for getting the data. So I have to somehow tell my program, when you get the data back, you have to inform me that the data is back, right? So what we're going to use is we're going to use the observable pattern, meaning that we're going to say, when I send the request, I'm going to provide an observer, right? And I can subscribe to that observer. So when the data is ready to use, I'll get a piece of information, right? Just like when you're subscribing to a news post or you're subscribing to a newspaper, whenever the paper is ready, you'll get the paper to your address, right? So I'm kind of listening. I'm saying, when this is done, let me know. But how do we make that work inside Angular? How do we make a subscription inside Angular? And that's what we're going to do in the next couple of lessons. Now again, first of all, I'm going to just jump into the service and prepare us for this subscription. Now what we need to do this is actually, first of all, we need to start using observables. So let's just do an import right here and start in bracket and observable like this. Now that's one thing we need from the RxJS package. Now this can be used in plain JavaScript, in Vue.js, in React. A lot of people are using the RxJS library. So Angular didn't provide this for us, they're just using it because it makes so much sense. Now the other thing that I want to kind of be able to do is map my data. So I want to say I'm getting some data back, but I want to convert that JSON data into customer data, right? So this is like, if you remember when we worked with the C# code, we could kind of take JSON and convert it into C# objects. I want to be able to do the same. I want to map my code from actual being just JSON into actually being these objects, these customer objects down here. And to do that, again, the observable setup or the RxJS, they made a map so that we can just say map JSON into TS objects. But to actually do this, what we need to do is we need this import. Now this import, I might as well just, you guys can see this, it's not easy to import. It's pretty much just a string, right? But you have to just put this in there and you just have to manually put this in. We're going to use the map next lesson. So put it in there and let's try and use this in the next lesson. I know this is scary stuff, but the more you use it, the easier it gets, right? So just try and put it in there and just do monkey see, monkey do, and then you'll start understanding it. Trust me, when you do this enough, you'll start understanding it. See you in the next lesson.